Ang Lee's Hulk. I have a lot of fond memories of this movie, despite it not being the most critically acclaimed comic book movie to say the least. At the time, I was astronomically hyped for Hulk because this was like the first major outing of Hulk in movies, and it felt like a long time coming. Pretty much my only source of exposure to the Jade Giant was the 70s TV series with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. There's no denying how important that show is to the character's history and how iconic it is, but by the early 2000s, that show was pretty outdated. Hey, not shaming practical pants ripping and Lou's crazy eyebrows, but it was time to get modern. With the turn of the millennium bringing in advancements to computer graphics technology, thus allowing fully animated characters to be on screen more prominently, like Gollum and Jar Jar Binks, it felt like the time was just right for the Hulk to hit the silver screen with a depiction that conveys just how massive and powerful he is. And honestly, I think this rendition of Hulk still holds up. Yeah, he's not incredibly detailed and his proportions are a little odd, but I still think it looks pretty damn good. And the big action sequence of Hulk in the desert is still entertaining as hell. My favorite aspect of this era of comic book movies was all the marketing. There's just nothing like 2000s summer blockbuster movie marketing anymore. The cheesy fast food commercials, the got milk posters and bus stops. The one for 2003's Hulk is especially prominent in my mind because of how much the branding of this movie pops out. It's impossible to miss that vibrant green in all of this movie's merchandise. Slap that on any product and it'd be sure to catch your eye. Cereal, soda, and of course, the toys. Walking into Toys R Us and seeing the dedicated section of toys for whatever the latest summer blockbuster movie was is a core memory of mine. Action figures, Hulk hands, t-shirts, and my purpose in life, tie-in video games. By the early 2000s, the Incredible Hulk's presence in video games was very minimal and frankly underwhelming. Guest appearances aside, we had a graphic adventure video game that looks more like a chore to play than anything else, a dime a dozen side-scrolling beat-em-up, and one of the worst PlayStation games I've ever played. Hulk the Pantheon Saga is sure to make you Hulk out. Needless to say, we were long overdue for a Hulk video game that delivers on the power fantasy that is smashing everything that stands in our way as the lean, mean green machine. And the ones to step up to the plate would be Radical Entertainment. These guys had an extensive and impressive list of licensed games dating back to 1992. We're talking vastly varied licenses from The Simpsons to friggin' CSI. And they had an opportunity to add a Marvel Comics icon to that long list. Hulk the video game was released on May 28, 2003 for PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Windows platform. Was it a smashing hit? Of course, the biggest aspect players would be looking forward to in a Hulk video game is combat. Developing a combat system for a Hulk video game is a fairly big undertaking because I'd argue that satisfying combat mechanics is more important for this character than it is for a lot of other comic book characters. And I mean satisfying in the sense that you feel the weight behind every punch. Punching stuff is like the Hulk's main thing. So much so that when superheroes have to be presented in the form of a simple logo or icon, like how Captain America is usually a star and Thor would be a hammer, Hulk is a fist. You kind of have to own up to that image. So I always feel like there's this unspoken promise that Hulk will stand out amongst the rest and deliver combat mechanics that are almost therapeutic with how much stress they allow you to relieve. Alright, fine, I might be asking for a little too much from a tie-in video game. Regardless, pummeling puny helpless soldiers and quantifying how many bones you just shattered in the poor bastard feels incredible. Hulk has no regard for the size of his adversaries. From equally hulking beasts to your everyday average Joe Schmo, the Green Goliath will deliver earth-shattering blows that make you go, "Oh!" The combat system here is very simple. We're not taking enemies out with finesse that demands complex inputs and timing like we're a fancy demon who could potentially shed a tear. We're going in loud, dumb, and powerful. Simple 3-button inputs with the light and heavy attack results in different attacks. The iconic Thunderclap is here offering a bit of range, and some grapple attacks that put Bane to shame. A simple feature that goes a long way in making you feel the absolute power coursing through the Hulk's veins is the ability to hold the attack button at almost any point in your combo and charge your punch. Seeing the gamma radiation emanating from the Hulk's fist accompanied with an escalating hum of sheer power, then wham! Swiftly melting your opponent's health bar with one devastating punch is just right. You can also use objects in the environment as weapons like general debris, crates, and barrels, as well as pipes and steel beams as makeshift clubs. As you'd expect, these do extra damage and allow you to take out multiple enemies at once a little easier, which is something that your normal melee attacks are sorely missing. Weirdly enough, this game's combat system was designed to have you take out one enemy at a time. You square up with a single person, or dog, do your 3-hit combo, then move on to the next one. While Hulk's attacks feel like they pack one hell of a wallop, not being able to sweep multiple enemies at once kinda feels strange given the Hulk's size. And it hurts the pace of these encounters, quickly making combat feel repetitive. Bam bam bam, next. Bam bam bam, next. Not to mention that there aren't any new attacks or combos to unlock. All the moves you get at the beginning of the game is all you'll have for the entirety of its runtime, and it is a very short moves list. So you're scraping the bottom of the already empty barrel when trying to keep combat feel fresh and varied. On a positive note, I do often enjoy the simplicity of these PS2 era brawlers, even down to the simple aspect of this game having a fixed camera angle. Running the gauntlet and making the most out of my small set of attacks against increasing amounts of enemies in these diorama-esque battles flips that switch in my brain that lets me just zone out and enjoy embodying a character through a video game, even if it doesn't have the deepest systems and captivating story. To me, these kinds of PS2 beat-em-ups feel like they carry the spirit of older games like Double Dragon and Streets of Rage, but brought into the third dimension. Those games have very limited movesets and simple level design, but they still manage to deliver a fun time by having combat that's flashy, punchy, and is good enough that you're always looking forward to caving the next goon's face in. Ramping up difficulty and periodically offering a well-designed boss fight also helps, which I'm very happy to say every boss fight in Hulk is excellent. The fight against Half-Life was a personal favorite. Making physical contact with him will cause you to take damage, so you have to throw objects at him, hit him with pipes, or knock him into these generators for massive damage. Despite most of the other bosses being Hulk-like foes that you'd expect would offer nothing more than a simple trade of fisticuffs, they each have their own unique abilities that make their boss fights challenging. To give you another example, in the boss fight against Ravage, engaging in hand-to-hand combat is ineffective. His moves are just better than yours. So you have to stomp the floor to cause stalactites to fall from the ceiling so you can use them against him. Sometimes you'll also have to take out some sort of generator or look out for environmental hazards while fighting your foe to make things even trickier. So going back to the simplicity of this video game, level design flows in the same vein. 80% of the game has you just trudging forward through different environments until you reach the finish line. Occasionally, you'll come across simple tasks like destroying generators to bring down force fields, or this mini-boss that has you throwing objects at a helicopter. One of the most memorable parts of the Hulk movie to me was seeing him take these giant leaps that have him covering miles in mere seconds. It was kinda disappointing not having the game adapt that aspect of the movie in a fun and engaging way. In one of the early levels, you do a fair bit of jumping from rooftop to rooftop, but they come in the form of these scripted spots where you essentially trigger a cutscene of Hulk jumping. Strangely enough, there's a brief section in one of the later levels that has you jump up these elevated platforms. It stuck out to me because it's one of the few, if not the only section of the game that had a platforming section. And it made me realize that had there been a couple more sections like this, it would have done the game some favors. Otherwise, you're often just running down corridors, breaking down walls, and making your way to the next group of bad guys. Something I found interesting is that running away from enemies is a totally viable option, which is something that you can do in many video games. I've cheesed my way through large groups of enemies by spamming the jump button and hoping that I dodge their attacks in plenty of games before. But what surprised me in this game is that it actually acknowledges this as something you can do. One of the loading screens tells you that you can fight or flee. Every time I use this strategy of running away from enemies and brawlers, hoping that I can reach the end of the level without bothering to beat up the bad guys, I feel a bit guilty about it. Like I'm cheating myself out of what's supposed to be the fun core gameplay loop of these kinds of games. And like I'm doing a disservice to the combat mechanics the game developers put so much effort into. But if you let me cook for a second, having the option to run away from fights can be appropriate for a Hulk video game. Not to paint the Hulk as some sort of coward, otherwise he'd be yellow instead of green. But we have seen him run away from crowds that spout monster at him and shrieks in terror many times before. The comparison to Frankenstein's monster is very obvious. I mean, he's one half of the Hulk's inspiration. So for a creature that can terrorize as easily as he can, you'd just as likely find him wanting to be left alone. So I'd say Radical Entertainment is pretty base for letting the Hulk flee from a fight in this game. A feature that's found in just about every beat 'em up from this era is a rage meter that, when triggered, allows you to do extra damage and perform massive screen clearing attacks. And if you thought the Hulk would be excluded from having such a feature in this video game, I mean, dude, what are you thinking? Being angry, in other words, full of rage, is like his whole deal. Of course he's gonna have a rage meter. Although, I kinda get why you think it's a little strange that Hulk has a rage meter in a video game. I mean, he's already at that point to begin with, right? The rage has been fulfilled. It makes sense for Bruce Banner to have a rage meter, triggering a Hulk out when it fills up, but I guess it's unfair to not give Hulk a rage meter. I mean, everyone can always get angrier. And technically there is no limit to how angry the Hulk can get, I think. But then what happens when the rage mode runs out? I guess he calms down a little bit, but not too much that he reverts back to Bruce Banner? See, because the game just doesn't have that mechanic of transforming back to Bruce in real time. Although that would be kind of cool. Like I said before, combat in this game is very limited, and when you're going on long stretches of smashing, bashing, and crashing your way through a level, it can get a little mind-numbing. But just as the game starts to reach that point, you're suddenly hit with a Bruce Banner level that breaks up that monotony. The inclusion of Bruce Banner dedicated levels in this game is something that I appreciate so much from the devs because he's a whole other half of this character that shouldn't be neglected. Not taking the time and effort to represent him in a video game in a way that's not just cutscenes and story stuff, I think would undermine the importance of Bruce. I know the game is called Hulk and most people are probably checking it out to smash stuff, but Bruce and Hulk go hand in hand. Bruce Banner shouldn't be treated like Peter Parker and Bruce Wayne, as if he's simply the secret identity of the superhero Hulk. The two are completely separate entities that make a whole. To give the SNES game some credit, you can revert back to Bruce Banner, and thankfully he keeps that fang on him. But this feels like the first and last time where it felt like Bruce Banner was actually given some thought as to how he should be included in the game. In Hulk Ultimate Destruction, he's just a bonus skin you can unlock, a pretty awesome one at that. We don't talk about the Incredible Hulk, so next. And in the Avengers, you just do on-rails walking segments. So I'd say that Radical Entertainment including Bruce Banner levels is pretty based. Not to mention the opportunities they offer of having gameplay variety. The Banner sections are stealth-focused levels where you make your way through labs in your nice white button-up and purple slacks that Bruce surely got from the clearance section because, let's be honest, going through as many pants as he does would financially destroy anyone.
I am never gonna financially recover from this.
Well, Metal Gear Solid is my favorite franchise of all time, so I have years of experience that'll make these levels a cakewalk. Really though, the Bruce Banner levels are pretty much Metal Gear Light. You play with boxes, choke out guards, avoid spotlights, disguise yourself as an enemy soldier, and even find yourself topless and strapped down to an examination table. And they're both even sponsored by Mountain Dew. When you're not alerting the guards because of the clap of your ass cheeks, you'll be hacking terminals in one of the most intense hacking minigames I've ever played. You're supposed to match the order of letters and numbers displayed on screen by swapping characters adjacent to each other, one at a time. It's a fairly simple concept, but what makes it difficult is that you don't even get half a minute to match the code. A lot of times I solved it quickly because every time you retry the minigame, the characters are scrambled in a random order and they just happen to already be close enough to matching the code. So I just swapped like 2 of them and I won. I like that there's no annoying penalty for failing the hack like an alarm or a cooldown and that you can just quickly retry until you get it right. One of the most jarring things about playing as Bruce Banner after a smashing spree as the Hulk is when you get a more accurate sense of scale. When you're fighting Hulk dogs and Gamma mutants, you don't really think about the size of them relative to a human being. But then you face them from the perspective of puny Banner and it is genuinely intimidating how massive these guys are. There's a stealth section where you have to sneak by a pack of sleeping Hulk dogs and it is butt-clenchingly terrifying. Much like how transitioning from Hulk-based levels to Bruce Banner ones changes the pace and offers the player a bit of variety, transitioning from Bruce Banner levels to Hulk levels continues that sentiment. But where Banner levels slows things down and gives us a bit of a breather, transforming back into the Hulk feels like a satisfying release that makes you forget you were kinda getting bored of this game's combat system just one level ago. This cycle of switching between Banner levels and Hulk levels keeps the game feeling fresh for its modest runtime. But I don't know why Bruce even bothers sneaking around and avoids confrontation. The dude is freaking jacked. I don't doubt for a second he can tear apart any of these Gamma mutants. The biggest surprise to me when I revisited this game recently was seeing that it's actually a sequel to the movie. I guess when I was a kid I wasn't really paying attention to the story and chalked it up as a coked up retelling of the movie with villains from the comics thrown in for good measure. Man, I saw a desert and I saw, oh yeah, I remember that part from the movie. I saw a big dog, oh yeah, I remember that part from the movie. I saw a science ball, oh yeah, I remember that part from the movie. I always really like when the tie-in video game for a movie acts as a prequel or sequel because it gives the illusion that the universe the movie established is grander than we thought. I say illusion because very rarely are tie-in video games considered canon, and Hulk 2003 is an example of such. Well, actually, I don't know, cause Hulk 2003 never got a direct sequel that would negate the events that happened in this game. But I mean, The Incredible Hulk starts in Brazil as a way to sort of follow up on the way Hulk ended with Bruce being in South America. But that's okay, because this game not being canon or being canon, depending on your headcanon, man, I'm saying the word canon a lot, it means that the game can have a significantly different tone that's fitting for a game of this genre and doesn't clash with the movie's more subdued and slow burn approach. Well, I don't know if subdued might be the right word, because, I mean, fucking look at this. This is insane, and frankly, it rules. The game certainly goes for a more lighthearted and Saturday morning cartoon approach, with a fast-moving plot, a colorful cast of villains for Hulk to fight, and a beautiful cel-shaded art style to tie it all together. Man, I love this game's art style. It sort of takes a different approach to cel-shaded graphics that really makes it stand out from other video games that have this art style. The characters have this shiny porcelain look to them that goes really well with this game's constant gamma radiation motif. This cartoony look also makes it really easy for characters to emote aggressively without making it look uncanny. The story follows Bruce Banner on the run as he gets in touch with his old colleague, Crawford, and he's helping him put together a cure for his Hulkitis. Crawford creates a device called the Gamma Orb. It's supposed to extract all the gamma radiation within Bruce and contain it. So we sneak into the lab housing the orb and we cure ourselves. Congratulations for a job well done, the game's over. Nah, just kidding, of course it was a setup. The orb doesn't rid Banner of the gamma radiation, but it does contain some of it, and Crawford takes it for himself, looking to free himself of his disabled body and transforming into Ravage. Names like Ravage and abomination. Makes me feel like all Hulk villains have to have some sort of aggressive, like, antagonistic word for their names. Madman. Pissed. No, I mean pissed. From here on out, the Gamma Orb is pretty much the MacGuffin of this story. It's the thing we're constantly chasing after throughout the game, and I think the story does a good job of weaving together different characters into the Gamma Orb, each with their own motivations. Obviously, Bruce Banner knows better than anyone the destruction this kind of power can cause, so he will stop at nothing to retrieve it before it gets to the wrong hands. Hands such as the ones that belong to General Riker, who I thought was just Thunderbolt Ross after a shave. Again, I wasn't really paying attention to the story when I was a kid. I'll give you one guess as to what this high-ranking military figure wants to do with the Gamma. He wants to weaponize it. Anytime you put a military head and a biologically altering experiment in the same room, that's what you'll get. The Gamma Orb is a great doohickey to be the catalyst for all the bosses we fight though. Someone out there is running a Gamma monster factory and we gotta stop them before it gets out of control. After being intercepted by Half-Life, we find out that Betty is being held captive in Alcatraz. After rescuing her, Betty reveals that she's been exposed to gamma radiation. I wonder how that happened. And she needs to be taken back to a military base to be cured. This plot point completely gets dropped after Bruce is captured by Riker and it's never resolved. At least not on screen or in any of the loading screens that provide an extra bit of context sometimes. I guess we're meant to piece together that the scientists in the military base were somehow able to cure Betty of her gamma exposure. I don't know, that's kinda lazy. After Betty busts us out, she informs us that someone known as the Leader has big plans for the Gamma Orb and is creating an army of Gamma soldiers in Alcatraz Island. I should introduce you to my friend General Riker. This is the weakest part of the story for me. The Leader is a well-known adversary of the Hulk from the comics, but he's just kinda dropped into the story without any explanation as to who he is or where he came from. Crawford at least had some setup with Bruce mentioning that they never saw eye to eye, possibly hinting that they have some history as colleagues, co-workers, or something of the sort. The rest of the crooks like Half-Life and Madman can be chalked up to just being hired muscle and special cases from all the people transformed by the Gamma Orb. What I mean is that you can easily fill the blanks for those guys. But for the Leader, how did he even become who he is? He's presumably been this big-brained MF before the Gamma Orb was created, but how could that be possible in this universe? The first case of another Gamma monster, well, not counting the movie of course, would be Ravage as a direct result of helping create the Gamma Orb. But we find out that Ravage is working for the Leader. How could Ravage be taking orders from the Leader if the Gamma Orb wasn't even around yet to transform Samuel Stearns into the big-brained MF? Unless Ravage was humble enough to take orders from some normal-ass dude and bring the Gamma Orb to him, thus transforming him into the big-brained MF. But where'd you get the funding for this impressive cavernous facility? Were you already an evil mastermind? Are we supposed to take his comic book origin as what also happened in this iteration? Am I giving too much thought to the story of a superhero movie tie-in game? Maybe, but I don't know, man. Something as simple as a flashback as the Leader monologues like, Hulk, we're not so different, you and I. I also got blasted with gamma radiation on that destined day, and now I'm this big-brained MF. Whatever. This moment with Bruce taking back his power goes pretty hard.
This isn't your power. It's my curse and I'm taking it back.
After defeating the Leader, we get a snippet of Crawford trying to replicate the Gamma Orb to no avail, Riker moving forward with his Gamma experiments, and the game closes out like any good episode of The Incredible Hulk, with Bruce Banner drifting toward the sunset to the tune of a piano. I know I just kind of skipped over a bunch of plot points in that summary, but not a whole lot happens in this game, man. For what I'm sure many would write off as another mediocre licensed comic book game, for me, 2003's Hulk makes for an oddly memorable experience. I can't put my finger on what it is exactly that makes me remember this game so fondly. Maybe it's the surprisingly good boss fights, or the art style, or maybe it's simply because it's the first notable Hulk video game I played. But where the simplicity in the combat and level design found in this game would feel like a weakness in another game to me, I find it fitting for the Hulk. Going through the motions put me in a sort of zen-like mood. Sure, at times I wish the combat system offered more options, but other times I found that knowing full well the scope of my abilities gave me a stress-free, lighthearted experience. The next Hulk game would go in completely the opposite direction and redefine what a Hulk video game should be, blowing up the Jade Giant's abilities with an extensive moves list, a new traversal system, and an expansive playground where we can unleash any pent-up aggression we may have. But that deserves its own video. So, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Special thanks to Sam, Carlos Fontes, and Punk Samurai 1985 for subscribing at the top tier. You guys are certified superheroes.